And how dare anyone out there make fun of Britney after all she's been through?
Chris Crocker, from idol to outcast. In 2007, a 2-minute video turned one person into the face of a cultural storm.
She lost her aunt. She went through a divorce. She had 2 kids. Her husband turned out to be a user, a cheater, and now she's going through a custody battle.
With tears streaming and a voice cracking with desperation, Chris Crocker shouted into a camera, "Leave Britney alone." The internet's response? Not empathy, but ridicule. What could have been seen as raw humanity was transformed into a meme, a global punchline. This is the story of Chris Crocker, one of the first viral celebrities, one of the first victims of online cruelty, and a queer icon who saw the darker side of fame long before the rest of us were ready to admit it. Roots and identity. Before the internet knew them as Chris Crocker, they were just Chris, a queer teen growing up in rural Tennessee. Their world was small, conservative, and often hostile to difference. The internet wasn't just a distraction, it was a lifeline. On MySpace, in chat rooms, and eventually on YouTube, Chris could express themselves fully.
When I got home from LA with my new tattoo, let me show y'all. It's a pretty woman tattoo. It says, "I want the fairy tale." Anyway, it's a pretty woman tattoo.
Makeup tutorials, rants, comedy skits, political takes, all with the same unapologetic flamboyance that made them magnetic. For many queer kids across the world, Chris was a revelation, someone who was loud, proud, and defiantly authentic in a culture that still mocked or silenced those identities. The Wild West of YouTube. It's hard to explain today just how raw the internet was in 2007. YouTube had just been live for 2 years. There were no influencers, no brand deals, no polished thumbnails, or TikTok-style edits. It was a chaotic mix of grainy webcams, bedroom confessionals, and anything that could hold attention for a few minutes. And in that chaos, Chris found an audience.
Ladies, what up, ladies? That's right. We in the ladies' room today. We got ladies' problems going on. That's right, ladies.
They weren't just vlogging, they were performing. Loud, emotional, theatrical. In a sea of shaky voices and awkward rants, Chris stood out. For some, they were a queer pioneer. For others, an easy target. Leave Britney Alone. September 10th, 2007. The night before, Britney Spears had delivered a shaky performance at the MTV Video Music Awards.
Look right in my face. It's Britney, bitch.
She was mocked brutally by tabloids, comedians, even fellow pop stars. The next day, Chris uploaded a video in defense of Britney.
What you don't realize is that Britney's making you all this money and all you do is write a bunch of crap about her.
Wrapped in a blanket, makeup smeared, sobbing into the camera, Chris begged the world, "Leave Britney alone." The video went viral instantly, millions of views in just hours. But compassion wasn't what people saw. Instead, they saw material, something to parody, something to laugh at.
All you people want is more, 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 more! Leave her alone!
Within days, Leave Britney Alone became the internet's biggest joke. Late-night talk shows replayed it with sneers. Parody videos multiplied by the thousands. From idol to outcast. Overnight, Chris wasn't a person anymore. They were a meme. News anchors labeled him unstable. Talk show hosts mocked their voice, their makeup, their sexuality. Strangers filled their inbox with hate, death threats, and slurs. Even parts of the LGBTQ+ community distanced themselves. Some saw Chris as too embarrassing, too flamboyant, too much of a stereotype. The truth is, Chris wasn't the problem. The internet was. But back then, no one was ready to admit it. Vulnerability online was a weakness to be weaponized. The toll of viral fame. The toll was brutal. Chris was just 19 when the world decided to tear them apart. The same video that made them famous also trapped them.
Leave Britney alone! Please!
In interviews years later, Chris described suffering anxiety, paranoia, and deep depression.
The one video I'm not acting in, honest to God, the one video that is a blog straight from the heart, is this video that's getting publicized.
They couldn't walk down the street without someone mocking the video. Their identity was reduced to one breakdown, one clip played over and over again. Today we talk about cyberbullying, doxing, and online harassment. But in 2007, there was no language, no awareness, no sympathy. Chris Crocker was living through the internet's growing pains in real time and paying the price. The queer lens. There's another layer to Chris's story that cannot be ignored: queerness. Queer people have always lived in a paradox of hypervisibility and invisibility. To be loud, flamboyant, emotional was to risk becoming a spectacle. Chris's breakdown was filtered through homophobia and transphobia. They weren't mocked just for crying. They were mocked for being them. For many, the ridicule wasn't about Britney Spears. It was about policing queer expression. The years after. After the storm, Chris kept creating music, documentaries, adult work, performance art.
Leave Britney alone! Please.
But the shadow of Leave Britney Alone never disappeared. Every project was met with reminders of that video. Every interview circled back.
Leave Britney alone, guys. Leave Britney alone.
Well, some newscasters like to say girl, but, you know, it depends on what you consider a guy or a girl.
It was as if Chris had been frozen in time, trapped in a blanket, trapped in a moment the internet refused to let go. The reevaluation. Hashtag Free Britney. More than a decade later, the hashtag Free Britney movement exploded.
What do we want? Free Britney! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Free Britney! Now!
Suddenly, the world remembered Britney's suffering and re-examined Chris's tears. News outlets that once mocked them wrote apologies. Fans who had laughed admitted they finally understood. Chris went from clown to prophet. Someone who had seen Britney's pain clearly, long before anyone else cared to listen. And in that reevaluation, Chris found vindication. They weren't crazy. They weren't hysterical. They were right. The sad legacy of a meme. But recognition came late, years too late. Chris Crocker's story shows us the cruelty of a culture that confuses vulnerability for weakness, that punishes people who cry out in pain by turning them into caricatures. They were a queer pioneer, a viral prophet, and one of the first to learn the internet's harshest lesson.
I don't think it was ever really about me or, you know, it's not that I feel vindicated or anything. I'm just happy that the conversation seems to be going to a place where...
That fame online doesn't come with compassion. It comes with ridicule. Conclusion. Chris Crocker's tears weren't just about Britney Spears. They were about all of us. Our appetite for mockery, our addiction to humiliation, a refusal to sit with someone else's pain. They weren't wrong, they were early, and their story is a warning. In a culture that rewards cruelty, empathy will always arrive too late. This is the dark psychology of virality. This is the tragedy of Chris Crocker.